everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into something pretty fascinating today.
Yeah.
It's where autism research and language education kind of intersect.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so get this. What if, encouraging multiple languages could actually help some autistic individuals? It's a question raised in this article by Dr. Jaime Hoerricks.
Okay.
It's called The Colonial Blind Spots in Multilingual Autism Research, a case for decolonizing language education.
Gotcha.
Right. So we're going to try to unpack some of the hidden biases and how we think about language and autism.
Okay.
And what a more inclusive approach could look like.
You know, it's interesting how we just accept some ideas about language without really, thinking about where they came from.
Right.
And especially in fields like education, those origins often say a lot about power dynamics and historical influences.
Yeah, for sure. So this article dives into a recent study about multilingualism and autism.
Okay.
And it kind of suggests that being multilingual could act as a sort of natural intervention
Oh, wow.
for some autistic traits. Interesting.
Especially when it comes to executive function skills. But Dr. Hoerricks argues there's more to the story.
Yeah.
What are some of the problems with how this study frames things?
Well, one of the biggest issues is that it, emphasizes spoken language proficiency,
Okay.
but it doesn't give a lot of weight to literacy, especially literacy in a child's home language.
Like it's saying you can talk the talk,
Right.
but can you...
Can you walk the walk? Can you read and write?
Exactly. And to Dr. Hoerricks' point, that kind of echoes colonial language policies that often prioritize dominant languages like English at the expense of other languages and cultures.
Right.
This makes me think about the replacement model in a lot of English language development programs.
Oh, yeah.
It often seems like the goal is just to get kids proficient in English.
Right.
Sometimes to the point where they lose their home language.
Yeah.
It's not just about picking up a new language.
Okay.
It's potentially losing part of who you are. Exactly. And that loss can really have a deep impact on someone's connection to their culture and identity.
Right.
Imagine not being able to, fully connect with your family history or traditions.
Yeah.
Because you've lost that ability to read or write in the language that carries those stories.
Dr. Hoerricks says, and this is a quote, "The question that should be asked is not merely whether multilingualism provides cognitive benefits, but whether multilingual children are able to retain full linguistic and cultural access to their home language."
Powerful.
Right. So it's not just about brain power. It's about, preserving something essential to who you are.
It really is. And when we frame multilingualism only as a way to, address deficits
in
autistic children, we're missing the bigger picture.
Right.
Language isn't just a tool for cognitive control. It's about identity. It's about belonging. It's about cultural continuity. To reduce it to just cognitive benefits reinforces a very narrow and honestly colonial view of language.
So are we really supporting bilingualism if we're only focused on, whether someone can speak English well?
Right.
It almost feels like we're saying it's okay to be multilingual as long as it serves, our purposes.
And that brings up another point. Dr. Hoerricks asks, is a child truly bilingual if they can speak their home language but can't read or write in it?
That's a good question.
It challenges what we think about being bilingual. It can't just be about serving the dominant institutions.
Yeah.
It's got to be about letting people embrace their full linguistic and cultural heritage.
So the article also brings up this idea of Gestalt language processing, or GLP.
Okay.
It suggests that some autistic individuals learn language more holistically
Interesting.
instead of breaking it down into rules and units.
It's like a different way of thinking about how we even approach language.
And it's fascinating because the study Dr. Hoerricks critiques focuses on, executive function challenges in autistic children as something to be fixed. But GLP suggests these might not be deficits at all.
Oh.
Just different ways people learn language.
So instead of seeing these differences as problems, maybe we should be changing how we teach.
Right. Embracing diverse learning styles.
Exactly.
Because that deficit mindset can be pretty limiting.
Yeah. If we can, shift to seeing these differences as strengths or different approaches, we can create learning environments that are much more inclusive.
The article points out that the study we've been talking about has a limited perspective.
Okay.
It focuses on Miami, which has a pretty established bilingual culture.
Right.
So it doesn't account for places where language is more tied to power dynamics and historical oppression.
That's a really important point.
The article mentions indigenous communities.
Right.
For a lot of indigenous people, multilingualism isn't just about cognitive benefits.
Yeah.
It's about resisting the erasure of their language and culture.
It's about survival.
Yeah.
It's a way to preserve their heritage.
So the study's focus on Miami, while interesting, creates a blind spot. It doesn't fully grasp how multilingualism works in contexts where language is really connected to power and identity.
And that leads to something potentially alarming. Misinterpreting these findings.
Oh.
What might seem like a positive message about the benefits of multilingualism
Mm-hmm.
could actually be used to justify policies that, like, further marginalize certain languages.
Like it could be twisted into something that sounds like it's promoting bilingualism,
Yeah.
but actually just reinforces English dominance.
All right. And the article warns that the findings, if taken out of context,
Mm-hmm.
could be used to support policies that, sound good,
Right.
but actually undermine true linguistic diversity.
Like, sure, other languages are fine as long as they help you learn English better,
Exactly.
which isn't real support.
It's just another way to put English above all else.
And it brings up another issue, right?
Yeah.
The danger of focusing on using multilingualism as a fix for autistic traits
Uh-huh.
instead of advocating for changes to education that respect all languages.
Yes, exactly. It's not about correcting autistic children.
Right.
It's about creating a system that values all learners.
So Dr. Hoerricks is calling for a pretty big shift in how we think about and approach language education.
It's not just tweaking a few things.
No, it's like a fundamental change.
The article describes it as a revolution in how we teach, preserve, and respect language.
We got to move beyond just celebrating the benefits of multilingualism
Yeah.
and see linguistic diversity and different learning styles as fundamental rights,
Absolutely.
not just tools for achieving something.
Right?
This is a lot to unpack,
It is.
but it's incredibly important to think about this critically.
Yes.
Dr. Hoerricks is raising these really difficult questions about how we view language and learning.
And it's a call to action for anyone who cares about diversity and preserving culture.
So how do we actually put these ideas into action? What would a decolonized approach look like in a real classroom?
That's what we're going to talk about next.
We'll dive into those questions right after. Never mind. We're just going to keep going.
Okay.
So welcome back. Before we, just now, we were talking about this need for a revolution in language education.
Right.
I'm curious to hear what a decolonized approach would actually look like.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's a big idea, but how does it translate to real changes?
It does feel kind of radical, right? Like, how do we move from these big concepts to actual changes in classrooms?
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Hoerricks lays out some key principles.
Okay.
One is that we need to go beyond spoken language proficiency.
Uh-huh.
We need to prioritize full multilingual literacy.
So it's not enough to just be able to chat in different languages.
Exactly.
It's like appreciating music from another culture. You might enjoy listening to a song,
Yeah.
but imagine not being able to understand the lyrics
Oh, yeah.
or read about the cultural influences that shape the music.
Yeah.
You're missing out on so much.
Exactly. And Dr. Hoerricks points out that this focus on literacy is really important when we consider autistic individuals
But
who might be Gestalt language processors.
right.
They learn language in a more holistic way.
Yeah.
So denying them access to full literacy could limit their understanding.
It's like trying to teach someone about a painting by only describing the colors, but not letting them see the actual painting.
Oh, I like that.
They're missing what makes that art unique.
Okay, so full multilingual literacy is key. What else?
Another big one is recognizing language as part of someone's identity, not just a tool for communication.
Right.
Language carries way more than just words and grammar. It's part of our sense of self,
Yeah.
our culture, history, our connections.
I've totally felt that, when I'm traveling and hear someone speaking my native language,
Yeah.
even if I don't know them, there's this instant connection.
Like you share something deeper.
Right. It goes beyond just the words.
Exactly. And when we reduce language to just a skill,
Yeah.
we strip away its cultural and personal meaning. And this is really important for communities whose languages have been marginalized.
Like their languages are acts of resistance,
Yeah.
preserving their heritage against forces that try to erase them.
It's powerful.
This is making me think differently about how we even value languages.
Me too.
It's not about speaking a language well.
No.
It's about the connection between language and who we are.
Exactly. And that leads to the third principle. We need to change our education systems
Okay.
to accommodate neurodivergent learners.
We need to move away from that deficit model,
Yes.
where differences are seen as problems to fix.
We need to create systems that celebrate those differences.
It's like those optical illusions,
Well, yeah.
where you see different images depending on how you look.
I like that.
We need to acknowledge that there are different ways of seeing the world,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to language.
This applies to all learners, not just neurodivergent ones. Like, think about Gestalt language processors.
Yeah.
They do well in environments that embrace their way of learning.
But traditional teaching, which breaks language down into pieces, might not be as good for them.
It's like teaching someone to ride a bike by explaining the physics.
Uh-huh.
It might make sense, but it won't help them actually ride.
That's a great analogy.
You need a different approach.
And that's what a decolonized approach is all about.
Right. Recognizing that there's no one way to learn.
We need to create learning environments that support different ways of thinking.
Absolutely.
So we've got these 3 principles:
Yeah.
full multilingual literacy,
Uh-huh.
recognizing language as a core part of identity,
Yes.
and reforming education systems to support neurodivergent learners.
This is a big shift,
It is. It feels huge.
but it's essential if we want inclusive and fair learning environments.
It's not just tweaking existing methods.
No.
It's challenging how we think about language learning.
And who it benefits.
So what can we do to make this happen? How do we put these principles into action?
That's a great question, and it's what we'll discuss next.
Yeah.
So, how do we put these principles into action?
It can feel like overwhelming
Right.
to think about changing these big systems.
Yeah.
But maybe a good place to start is awareness. Like recognizing that our current systems are often built on biases.
Even if we don't realize it.
Yeah. And once we start seeing those biases
Yeah.
in the curriculum, the teaching methods,
The funding.
then we can start to challenge them.
And advocate for change.
So it's about like shifting our perspective
Yeah. Like putting on new glasses.
to see things differently.
Exactly. And that new perspective can lead to action,
Okay.
like in the classroom.
Okay.
Teachers can do a lot by using what's called culturally responsive teaching.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of that.
It means valuing the different languages and cultures students bring in.
It's moving away from that idea that English is the default,
Yeah.
making space for other languages to be just as important.
And it's more than just letting students speak their home languages.
Right.
It's about making those languages part of the curriculum.
So if a child speaks Spanish,
Yeah.
it's not just something they do in a separate class.
Right.
It's part of everything.
It's in the lessons, the books, the activities.
Because everyone gets to experience it.
And it helps break down those hierarchies we talked about.
Where some languages are seen as better than others.
Exactly. But changes in the classroom are only part of it.
Right.
We need to advocate for bigger changes, too.
You mean like at the school district level?
Yeah, or even state or national.
Because if the policies and funding don't support these changes,
Yeah.
it's going to be hard for teachers to make a difference.
Totally. We need policies that support full multilingual literacy.
Not just English.
And we need funding for programs that help teachers do this.
And we can all be part of advocating for this. So
Yes.
what can we do?
Well, you can contact your officials, go to school board meetings,
Okay.
support organizations fighting for language justice.
Those are all good, but are there things we can do every day?
Yeah. You can support bookstores that have books in different languages.
Okay.
Go to cultural events that celebrate different languages. Even just learn a few phrases in a language you hear in your community.
It's about showing that we value these things.
That you want to see them in the world.
It's about making those choices to embrace these differences.
Yes. And remember, this isn't about fixing deficits.
Right.
It's about a more just world for everyone.
Where languages are seen as a strength.
A source of creativity.
And a reflection of all the different ways of being human.
Beautifully said.
This deep dive has made me realize how much language is part of our lives.
It's everywhere.
It's our identity or social systems.
It affects everything.
Yeah, I'm going to be thinking about this a lot.
Me too. It's a good reminder that we can always keep learning.
And hearing different voices.
Keep the conversation going.
So as you go about your day, listeners, think about this. If multilingualism is a right, not just a benefit, how can you support that right?
For yourself and everyone else.
And the journey doesn't end here?
Nope. Keep exploring, keep asking questions.
Yeah.
So how do we put these principles into action?
Yeah, like where do we even begin?
Well, it can feel kind of overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
To think about changing these whole systems.
Right.
But I think a good first step is just like awareness. You got to recognize that the systems we have now are built on biases,
Okay.
even if we don't realize it.
Right.
And once we start to see those biases, in the curriculum, the teaching, even the funding, then we can start challenging them.
And advocating for something different.
Exactly.
So it's about, like, changing how we see things.
Yeah, like putting on a new pair of glasses.
And seeing the world differently.
Exactly.
Okay, so that shift can lead to action.
Right. Like in classrooms.
Yeah.
Teachers can make a huge difference by using something called culturally responsive teaching.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
It means valuing the different languages and cultures that students bring with them.
So it's moving away from that idea that English is the only important language.
Right. Creating space for other languages to be just as important.
And it's more than just letting kids speak their home languages in class.
Oh, yeah, it's way more than that.
What else?
It's about weaving those languages and cultures into the actual curriculum. Like imagine a classroom where if a kid speaks Spanish,
Okay.
Spanish isn't just something they do in a separate ESL class.
Right.
It's part of all the lessons, the books they read, everything.
So everyone gets to experience that language and culture.
Exactly. It helps kids see the world from different perspectives.
Yeah, and appreciate how cool it is to have all these different languages.
Right. And it helps break down those hierarchies.
Where some languages are seen as, like, better.
Right.
But changes in classrooms are just one part of it, right?
Yeah, we need to go bigger.
Like what?
We need to fight for bigger systemic changes.
So, like, at the school district level.
Yeah. Or even state or national.
Because if the policies and the funding aren't there,
Yeah, it's not enough.
even the best teachers won't be able to do much.
Right. We need policies that support full multilingual literacy.
Not just English.
Right. And funding for programs that train teachers in these new methods.
And we can all be advocates for this.
Absolutely.
So what can we do? I'm thinking writing letters to, like, politicians, going to school board meetings.
Those are all great.
Are there things we can do, like, every day?
Sure. You can support local bookstores that carry books in other languages.
Okay.
You can go to cultural events that celebrate different languages.
Cool.
You can even just learn a few phrases in a language you hear in your neighborhood.
It's about sending the message that you care about these things.
That you want to see the world change.
It's about choosing to embrace these differences.
Yeah.
Even in small ways.
And remember, this isn't about fixing anyone.
Right.
It's about creating a better world for everyone.
Where all languages are seen as strengths.
Yeah, a source of creativity.
A reflection of what it means to be human.
I like that.
This deep dive has really shown me how much language is a part of our lives.
It's everywhere.
From our identity to, like, how society works.
Yeah.
I'll definitely be thinking about this more.
Me too. It reminds us that there's always more to learn.
And more voices to listen to.
Keep the conversation going.
So listeners, as you go about your day, ask yourself, if multilingualism is a right, not just a skill, how can you support that right?
For yourself and everyone else.
Keep exploring and keep asking questions.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious.